Rob, thanks for joining me today, and obviously getting involved with our Scaleup Diaries series. Obviously, it's the fourth one we've done, so it's much appreciated. As I said, hope we can talk about some relevant sort of experiences from your career and from Judopay's journey in terms of what you've learned, which we can then share with sort of anyone reading or listening to the outputs of this. But it'd be really useful to get maybe a quick history on yourself and then maybe Judopay. But I guess if I was to do a pod of history career that I picked up from looking through some of the information I found about you, but 16 years or first class degree from Imperial, 5 years at an institutional bank, moving to associate director, then to managing director of a fintech business, to then founding your own software company, a successful business over a number of years, to now being a board advisor to Judopay, along with being a startup advisor. It's obviously a very highly successful 16-year career. I suppose if you were to look back on
Thank you.
The Rob sort of maybe in his university days, was this how you mapped out your career path, or how would you have seen your career sort of evolving to back then?
Well, no, I don't imagine it was. I think if I look back to me as a few years ago, the sort of university career days, I suspect I would have believed I would be a corporate man. Kind of my looking at my career ahead, which has not turned out to be the case, and I'm very grateful for that. Actually, had a great experience working for a big multinational kind of investment bank, and I really enjoyed that, and I thought it was an excellent way to start my career. Sort of learned a lot, and you take both the good and the bad. I think the challenges, and no kind of setup is perfect, but I'm very grateful for kind of that experience. But for me, it was always, the future of the career was always about, I'm a passionate technologist, but it's not just technology for technology's sake. I've always been a big advocate that, it's about using technology to change something, to deliver change. The bigger the ask, or the tougher the ask, the more exciting kind of for me. And I think, back in sort of 2009 or so, the opportunity to kind of take some of what I, built and learned, back then it was UBS Investment Bank, kind of the corporate I referred to, with a colleague of mine actually, and kind of go it our own. And I think there's a lot of naivety about what that means, kind of at that stage of your career, but I'm grateful for having done it. And, two kind of companies later, made lots of, mistakes, lots of successes along the way. And, but I couldn't look back. I wouldn't look back now and want to change that kind of, trajectory. And so, kind of being in a company like Judo feels very, very natural now. And I believe something like that is kind of what I would now look forward as being kind of, never say never, but I think that's probably the type of environment I would say I'd expect to be in the next 10 years.
Fantastic. What was as I said, a lot of the companies that we often engage with and recruit for are startup, scale-up businesses. You made the point that the younger Rob might have seen himself as a corporate man and obviously worked with UBS for a number of years. What would you say was there a moment in time or a tipping point which made you realise that maybe your path was destined for the startup or the scale-up community? Any moment in time or a realisation about a character in yourself that was maybe more suited to the journey you're on now?
I mean, I think it's interesting if you look at kind of when that change started to happen. It was, I said 2009. I formally left, and we kind of set up with a partner. We set up a new business, a startup. And I think that didn't just kind of happen overnight. That the thinking around that sort of permeated for probably a good year or so. And what was happening back in sort of 2008, 2009 was kind of just post-crisis, post-financial crisis. And so I think, the cliche that crisis breeds opportunity, rang true for us. And for me, it made me look at, something like, I said UBS is a great company and great experiences, kind of working in that environment. But you kind of also take stock of what's important. You also take stock of the fact that even sort of, businesses that you think are infallible, sort of are not necessarily the case. And, UBS has done well and continues to do well. But I think for me, it was kind of a perspective shift. I think the crisis back then, the financial crisis, allowed me to kind of take that step back and perhaps remove some of the corporate blinkers somewhat, and realize actually that agility is something very, very difficult to deliver on scale. And I think over the course of that time frame, I think, having ideas, wanting those ideas to be acted on at a pace that felt natural for me, but not necessarily, wasn't necessarily something that could be supported, properly, in that environment, in that time was I think a big driver. And looking back, I think that need to that business agility need, so to deliver technology that has an impact, and not be constrained by that, I think is something that I think really allowed me to step up a gear and brought the passion out.
Okay, that's
in a way that I think is difficult to do, not impossible, but just harder to do perhaps in a larger corporate.
Yeah, no, that definitely rings true with a number of other sort of entrepreneurs and sort of business owners that you speak to in terms of that opportunity arising. And maybe leaping forward to the now, I'd set my business up actually in 2008, so it was during the crisis rather than sort of maybe post. But so I can definitely empathise with a lot of that stuff you said. With I can definitely say the last 10 months has been probably a double whammy compared to what we probably experienced in 2008, certainly in my industry. But where you said crisis often breeds opportunity, obviously Judopay have done some amazing work in the last sort of 10 months, and obviously a new product that's released, Judo Accept, again, probably is a good testament to that. But I guess have you guys as Judopay or yourself seen, what opportunities have you seen come out of the last 10 months, which you has made you help you shift the business for the good?
I think that's kind of, there's a couple of ways to look at that, and it definitely has done. I think, you mentioned Judo Accept, and I think that was really a kind of a product pivot in response to COVID. I think that's a great example of kind of that business agility kind of commentary from earlier. And what is Judo Accept? It's the ability to accept payments, in person, but at a distance, sort of using a QR code, in essence. There are other delivery mechanisms as well. You can send this via email or text and so on. But from an in-person perspective, the QR code is probably the more sort of sensible kind of choice of delivery in this kind of time. And when you've got businesses, being impacted, a number of our customers impacted so severely by kind of COVID, the various lockdowns and restrictions of the year, you need to, looking for a new way to kind of accept payments, to interact with their customers whilst, kind of keeping that safety element, kind of at the forefront as well. And how do we deliver and launch something new, which doesn't require our customers in a difficult time to suddenly themselves have to kind of pivot resources, potentially quite limited resources, in order to build and adopt something. So I think what was quite, powerful about Judo Accept was the fact that from a merchant perspective, they didn't require any kind of technical integration at all in order to get up and running, kind of with that. So it was kind of a no-code solution that looks good, as well, kind of it's catchy, it's engaging, it's kind of a slick interface, still kind of adhering to Judopay's kind of mobile-centric, kind of bar of quality. And I'm very proud of the team at Judo actually kind of recognizing quite early on, listening to our customers and saying, what do they need? What are they going to need? What are they likely to need? How can we act now? How can we kind of, pivot our roadmap and priorities in 2020 in order to get something delivered that's kind of high quality and can be, quickly rolled out to our customers? So quite excited about that. But I think that's kind of one of the opportunities that we see. And just on that, I think the broader picture for a business like Judo, but I think for our customers is, COVID in 2020 has been an accelerant for many ideas and shifts in consumer or kind of just general public behavior that perhaps were anyway underway, but accelerated at a pace that would otherwise have perhaps kind of happened over years. So the shift towards kind of more mobile or kind of digital, kind of use cases and workflows for businesses that maybe have toyed with these ideas, but just sort of we're not necessarily expecting to get there anytime soon. So I think all of that's kind of positive, and there's definitely big opportunity in that. Yeah. But then looking at the kind of the company more internally, there's a big opportunity here to rethink how the workforce is engaged. What does a company culture look like? What does a good company culture look like? The kind of working from home or remote working, is should there be a stigma? Is there still a stigma? What does again good look like there? And we've done a huge raft of changes over the course of this year to kind of refine our culture and our policy towards kind of these aspects. And I think there's still plenty of opportunity to kind of uncover on that front.
No, 100%. That definitely links on. We, as a recruitment business, we have a passion for the people side of a business as much as anything. So definitely strategy and product obviously play a big part in the business success, but it is the people underneath that make turn it into reality and really are the lifeblood of the business. And definitely, I had a couple of questions around that. And I've run a couple of roundtables with sort of heads of recruitment and recruitment managers and HR managers recently, and their biggest concern is the impact on company culture in terms of the disruption to the workforce, the distribution of it now moving out to working from home, whereas a lot of companies' cultures are often formed about that. The water cooler chats, as the expression is being used a lot now. What you mentioned, you guys have done a lot of changes around to help improve or impact the culture. What are some of the things that you guys have identified and are doing in Judopay?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things was again, it can kind of comes down to that agility point, which was we kind of sat down as a leadership team, quite early on with HR, of course, as part of that, to look at this isn't going to be a few weeks, this isn't a few months here. This is going to be in itself going to last a while, and the ramifications are going to be long lasting, beyond COVID. And so, what can we take from that in a positive way? So rather than seeing this as a something to kind of compensate for on a short-term basis, was very much kind of starting that journey with a kind of a strategic outlook on it. We have, I mean, one of the things that always appealed to me about judo, and still appeals, of course, is its strong sense of culture and cultural identity and values. And so we kind of very quickly, we've always supported remote working, admittedly not on the scale that we've had to do it this year, but that's because we do enjoy those water cooler moments. We're a company that, one of the privileges of being a smaller company is that you get to know everybody and form those kind of good, kind of good relationships and kind of strengthen the culture on a personal level. So how do we transform that? And so we quite, kind of early on decided that we wanted to release a kind of a remote first manifesto to the company. So I think we've always valued transparency, but I think in a time like this, in a situation where you are whether by design or forced to remote, so heavily remote, you really need to kind of think transparency and many of the kind of the dimensions that were still important to judo prior to kind of being so remote heavy. We almost have to amplify them, kind of in a remote first kind of context. So things like, for example, we almost double down on our already quite strong culture. So we have weekly virtual town halls. We used to have them sort of every 2 to 3 weeks, but we made the decision that we needed to ramp that up to weekly. And initially there were concerns: is that going to be too much, or are people going to feel they're joining calls where there's not enough of new content, or sort of taking up people's diary unnecessarily? And it couldn't be further from that. We're almost always struggling to keep within the time of those virtual town halls. We really encourage everybody to get their webcams on. Everybody at least has to have a sort of a profile pic, so that you're looking at a sea of faces, even if they're not sort of live video feeds. We actually kind of changed the structure of our virtual sort of town halls to be sort of we kind of actually spotlight random people within the company. Sort of this is open. So we talk that we're going to kind of have different voices speak up across these things, share concerns, share successes as well, get an insight into kind of what different parts of the business are doing. We also kind of on a weekly basis have a sort of a 3-minute interview with a random member of the team. So kind of really, regular contact. I would probably argue we are more kind of in communication with each other, about the material things, about what's going on in the company than we were before. And another big kind of shift for us is recognizing the need to shift from a kind of a speak first culture to a write first culture as well. So understanding that, you know, in a remote world, the dangers of knowledge silos forming are even more acute. And so how do we really kind of emphasize making sure that we kind of document and capture, you know, our priorities, our you know, our concerns, our challenges, the opportunities, and really kind of share those things in a written form as well as kind of talking them over. I think it's been among a number of things that we've done that's really kind of helped to kind of strengthen the company and see us actually successful. You know, I would argue we're a stronger culture, we have a stronger cultural identity, and we've been probably more productive and aligned as a team, you know, this year than say the year before. And that's not because we were coming from a bad place.
That's really good to hear. And it's amazing to hear that. Yeah, there's definitely concerns out with clients we speak to about culture being damaged, and I've definitely got that sort of sense of trepidation with my own business in terms of what does that mean for the identity and the culture that we had, and how do we maintain what I think we had was good beforehand, and how do we maintain it now with obviously the very different working practices and going forward. Without necessarily sort of returning to a negative, but I suppose I think all of us have been through personal or business challenges over the last 9 months. Are there any that really sort of stand out for yourself that have been the Mount Everest to climb, the one that's really kind of got the grey cells sort of ticking over and sort of led to sort of long debates and agonising to reach a good resolution?
I mean, I talked about it being kind of remote first, and the choice of language there wasn't accidental. I think we had a lot of debate internally, both at the management level, but actually, you know, kind of across the whole company as well, around, you know, is it actually, you know, we were so successful in many respects with our move to remote working. It was pretty seamless for us. You know, do we need an office? What was kind of, you know, one of the kind of the debated points of the year. And you know, short answer for us is our opinion is, whilst I think the nature of the office changes, and as I said, it's a remote first ethic. So we're probably expecting most people in a post-COVID world to still predominantly work remotely for most days of the week. We didn't like the idea of kind of a future where we didn't have a place to kind of physically congregate, you know, meet. But I think it's changing the nature of what an office means. You know, it's not just a place to go and do your job, perhaps as it is maybe seen historically. I think it's almost like a collaboration space. And so how do you change, you know, kind of how you use that space, even how you would lay out that space. So I think we've kind of wrestled throughout the year with kind of what's the right format, you know, what's the right balance between remote versus, you know, enabling some kind of in-person identity or aspect to our identity. And I think the hybrid, although arguably harder to do, you know, because you're sort of having to kind of cover both aspects. I think that's one area that we feel is the challenges are worth it. But the other thing is, especially in a year of crisis, you know, where people are worried and the macro situation is so I guess turbulent. You know, I think one of the things that's very important for me as a manager, and I look at my team and kind of it's one of the values of Judo, is that the trust and the psychological safety that we want to be able to give all the members of the company. And, you know, being able to do that effectively and well, you know, in a remote, on a completely remote basis, you know, proved challenging. You know, so kind of looking at how we can do that. I mean, the company town halls and things like that, these are excellent, but they're not necessarily good enough for the one-to-one level. So, you know, rolling out over the course of this year, things like, you know, looking at your benefits package and looking at things like well-being. And you know, we've been very successful in rolling out you know, some well-being benefits that I think have been really positively taken up by the team. Really kind of going back to kind of managerial basics as well with regards to, you know, one-to-ones and you know, carving explicit time in the diary for, you know, people often talk about having an open door policy, but then your work calendar actually doesn't really allow for that. And so, you know, kind of making that, you know, kind of take first place has been kind of an evolution for many of the managers at Judo, not because it was in a bad place, but just the importance of not being complacent here and really giving people who, you know, if you're on your, you know, many people are you know, remote working means working on your own, working in isolation. And so how do you ensure that people aren't, you know, are getting what they need, getting the support they need? And we've invested a lot of on that, of course. And similarly for our customers, it's been a year of challenge for our customers, we talked about the opportunity. That's the glass half full side of that conversation earlier. But this is stemming from many of our customers going through a very, very difficult time. And how can we be there for them? How can we be how can we lend our whatever strength we have towards that? Judo Accept is one sort of a realization of that, and it's a positive one. But it's born out of ultimately many of our customers being in having a very difficult year, and so it's not to trivialize and gloss over kind of the various challenges that have hit businesses and individuals alike.
100%, I agree. Funny enough, picking up on a point you made just slightly earlier, you beat me to the punch, as I picked up on it actually, about the well-being, the mental sort of health aspect of the impact of the last 10 months, and I'd picked up from about I think it's a platform called Snell that you might invest in on the mental health side. Spill, sorry. But also the self-care data as well, which I saw on your website. I was just going to ask you whether that was a new benefit that had been rolled out, or one that you'd actually been needed, people have been using a lot more of in the last 10 months. I'm guessing.
I think Judo's always, I think, taken this aspect of kind of our culture and I guess benefits package seriously. But those are both new, newly rolled out. During Spill was something we were looking at prior to COVID. I think we maybe accelerated some of that as a result of COVID. And the self-care days as well. We wanted to. There's still a stigma with mental well-being and or mental health, and we wanted to kind of try and where people were comfortable, sort of treat almost, well, not almost, but have parity between physical health and mental health, and so kind of demarcating the two. What we have had, since we rolled it out, we've had people use those. Some people maybe still don't feel comfortable to kind of call it out in that way, and that's absolutely fine, and we support that. But it's definitely a culture where we try and we're trying to remove whatever barriers may still remain. Many of these perceptual barriers within judo, that is, for this kind of stigma, and it goes hand in hand with the transparency point I talked about earlier. It's a case of it's okay for things to go wrong. Things do go wrong. Supporting that with kind of a no blame culture. It's far more important to speak up when something isn't going well, so we can react on it. And if there is a problem, or if there is something troubling you, it's better to have help with that, or it may prove beneficial to have kind of help with that. So that kind of safety point, that trust point, is something we kind of breed in our DNA of judo culture and values, and it's lived and breathed kind of from the very top of the organization as well. So as a senior leadership team, for example, we have regular 360s where the whole company can provide feedback on us as individuals. We share that feedback publicly with the company. We also share our action plans with the company, and we periodically give updates on what we're doing and how we're doing and progressing towards those action plans. So it's very much all centered around making and ensuring that people feel that they can trust. They can trust in the leadership, that it's a mutual trust, and that they feel safe, and that they feel that they have a way to balance kind of their work kind of expectations and delivery objectives with kind of a healthy and sustainable, and ultimately, look, it's reinforcing, right? If people feel good, feel happy, feel kind of physically and mentally good, then they're more productive. They're enjoying what they do. They're doing more more things that can have a positive impact for the business, for our customers. So we don't see these things as kind of at odds with each other, or mutually exclusive, or one is at the expense of the other.
No, 100% agree. No, we've tried a few things, done a number of things similar to that ourselves, and probably one of the main ones, we moved to a 4.5-day week, almost at the start of lockdown, simply for that partly hopefully we're nice employers and whatever, but actually definitely for that sense of well-being, so people didn't feel that the world's hard, we've got to work twice as hard. We that word trust, as we mentioned a few times, is so imperative that we've got to trust that we've had to put everyone to put trust in each other, whether it's forced or earned in the early stages, that we've got to be doing this, but everything's got to be building to enforce that trust and
Absolutely.
and beyond. And I definitely made a very conscious effort in the early stages, because we were saying have Friday afternoon off. I think there might have been a natural instinct of, well, they're saying that, but do they mean it? And actually, are they going to be using that as a reason to the ones of us that go off and enjoy the sun, or where it might have been back in the summer? So I was very consciously, I'd be going out, I'd do quite a lot of running. So I went out and I was doing a run on a Friday afternoon, but I'd be quite conscious about potentially posting something in our Teams group about the fact I've been out and done a run, just to try and reinforce that, use the time to
absolutely. And that, you know, what you've talked about there is not to be not to be kind of understated. I think it does take time, you know, even with the best of intentions and you know, sincere intentions, you know, there are certain, you know, aspects where people still wonder, you know, how will that be taken, how will that be interpreted? And so, but I think that takes time, and the transparency points I talked about, you know, help with that. But I think what you just described is living and breathing them. So, you know, I you know, sort of being guilty of that myself sometimes, where, you know, I tell people you need to switch off. You know, you need to make sure that you know, it is a sustainable, you know, kind of workload or kind of working week. And then if I'm sending emails that are, you know, very late at night or on a weekend, you know, that, you know, it's kind of at odds with that. And it's difficult, because I think part of being in the startup or scale up scene is, you know, both a blessing and a curse, I think, which is the blurring of work and passion and hobby and so on. And as a technologist, that's even more so for me anyway. I suspect most technologists. You know, we you know, do what you love what you do, kind of, again, another kind of cliched line and mantra, but you know, very, very true for me, and as I said, many technologists and many at Judo. And so sometimes it's difficult, because I don't see it as work, or, you know, you get excited about what you're doing, and, you know, seeing how some of the team responded and worked on something like Judo Accept, you know, it very much is the same, you know, sort of same thing kind of shining through. So it's understanding when it's passion driving some of these things, it's okay, as long as it's not a perceived work deadline or judgment on your work performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. I'm certainly doing a recruitment role. It's very difficult to do recruitment at the weekend, so I probably have to sort of flip that over and use it in terms of negotiating, qualifying with the kids and stuff like that, rather than actually going out and helping find people jobs. But no, it's been really interesting. I guess then, looking ahead now in terms of your own sort of personal goals and Judo's goals, then obviously the world around us has probably changed a lot of things. And obviously I've got a selfish interest in looking at the people side, the talent acquisition. I know this year for a lot of companies, obviously Judo hasn't been a big hiring year. It's been great to be able to help you with a couple of niche hires in that time to help keep building the team. But with the changes that obviously you talked about, so the working from home first and these side of things, how do you see, what changes, if any, do you see in terms of how you go about your talent acquisition now going forward, in terms of whether it's looking in different talent pools, that even looking for a different type of person potentially to what you might have looked for previously, because of the changes that have been, some forced and some that have maybe opportunists, I guess. But do you have a vision of how that might look like for Judopay going forward now?
I mean, there's a few different parts to kind of that. So I guess I'll cover a few. I'll cover a few there. You know, with regards to kind of what do I look for? I don't know that that's entirely changed, but it's probably become perhaps more acute. You know, in a remote first kind of culture. And one of the things for me is you know, the mindset and attitude. You know, the value fit was always important, but I would say it's probably even more so. You know, kind of you know, in a, well, this year and probably, you know, realistically, incredibly, you know, I think in a remote first, you know, kind of culture going forward, that will only, you know, kind of grow, or I don't see that changing. And so I think then I look at some of the, you know, the great hires actually we've made through ISL this year. I think what we have been able to kind of benefit from, you know, I think is kind of, you know, the consultative relationship approach to us, for example. And so I think that's an important dimension now, as the value fit, you know, as I said, you know, that the value of that being the, you know, the right the right fit for Judo, is only been amplified. So if I look at a couple of the hires that we've made, through ISL this, over the past kind of 12 months, they have really kind of shined, actually, in a year like 2020, possibly even more so than they might have done, otherwise, because it's really allowed, I keep talking about the word trust, and as I said, it's a two-way thing. And so, we want to be able to trust, we do trust, kind of our team and our people, and the kind of the scale-up environment is quite good for allowing people to kind of seize challenges and opportunities before them, to the level and at the pace that they want. In a younger company or a smaller company, the impact that can have, is huge. It can be the difference between seeing something like Judo Accept delivered or not, in the kind of time frame. And I look at, I'm thinking of a couple of hires in particular from ISL that have been kind of really standout for us this year. But I think the couple of aspects to that is, there is this accountability, this kind of pride and accountability in the work that they do, in wanting, to deliver. That I think I talked about, for me, this kind of value of technology to solve a problem, to make a difference, not just for technology's sake. And I think, kind of being able to, hire people with a track record, is on this kind of level, in terms of the accountability, the trust element, is something that is very, very difficult to do. And so being able to kind of lean on, kind of a partner like yourself in order to achieve that, I think it's been instrumental for us this year. And we've been fortunate enough to hire this year. But certainly kind of going forward, as we want to scale that up, that needs to work. That needs to work well. I mean, making a poor hire, or the wrong hire, has always been an expensive, mistake, for any business. But as I said, we feel these things even more acutely now. And in times of crisis, you really want, to have the very best, and the best feeds off each other as well. So that becomes kind of self-reinforcing. I think in terms of, kind of what am I kind of, looking forward on how is this going to change? How is this going to evolve? I think we've done some great work this year on this, but I think there's more to do. And kind of working and collaborating with, for example, yourself on refining this process, is looking at recognizing and tailoring the recruitment process to reflect a remote first world. We can't just do exactly the same thing that we did before. The world has changed, the format has changed, and we need to make sure that our approach to that embraces it and sets us up to succeed in that world, rather than in spite of that. So this is kind of looking at how can we engage with people before they start, build up that identity, with Judo, sort of before, whether that's mundane things like setting up hardware equipment and getting it delivered, to them in advance, and using that as an opportunity to kind of engage, through to inviting them to various kind of, socials. I talked about, how do we kind of engage with the company, and we've rolled out a kind of an employee engagement calendar, for example, that's now in everyone's diary. So how do we get people involved in that process, kind of earlier on, even before they start? How do we treat, how do we take advantage of things like, kind of G Suites, kind of, whiteboarding tools to kind of, recognize that you're not going to be in an office, but many technologists, for example, still want, and it makes sense for many interview processes, to involve a whiteboard of some kind. Okay, well, how do we embrace a virtual whiteboard as a first-class citizen, rather than, kind of something that we have to, deal with on the day, on the call? And I know we, sort of one of our more recent candidates that we've hired through you, we had a very successful, and it was a, really kind of gave confidence that we were making the right hire, because we set up Google has a product called Jamboard, just a virtual whiteboard. That person took the initiative to start drawing, start drawing their the various platforms that they've been working on, ahead of the interview. So which was fantastic, and actually it allowed for a lot more detail, a lot more considerate detail, going into that interview. I was able to kind of review that material before the interview, so again, a lot more informed questioning for myself, and it was an incredibly kind of interactive and quite geeky call, an interview between myself and the candidates who we later hired. And I think, as I said, actually it led to a much more enriched kind of experience for both myself and the candidate, which perhaps in a kind of a pre-COVID era, wouldn't have been there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I suppose you think about that out loud, then chances are if you were running that session in the office, they would have been sitting outside in the reception area waiting to go into the room, and it would have been actually that person chance to almost do the prep in the interview area that they were going to go into, even though it was virtual. But it was more constructive. That's really good to know, and great to hear that we've been able to have a positive impact on the hires you've made, and hopefully continue to do so. I was really interested by also that obviously you're an entrepreneur, as you said, it's an entrepreneur at heart by the sounds of it, and I was really interested about seeing the mentoring work you do through, I think it's Antler, the VC firm. So I suppose maybe as a final question, especially with what you've learned over the years and what you've really learned in the last 10 months, I guess what would be the key bits of advice you'd be giving to a budding entrepreneur or a company that's in their sort of early phases now, in terms of the definite do's or don'ts, or the pitfalls that you've witnessed or seen over the years?
Oh, that's that's a difficult one because there are so many exceptions to the various rules and approaches out there, and I won't pretend to have all of the answers there. I think the biggest piece of advice that I can kind of give, kind of around this is, look, it's hard. It's really hard. It takes a lot out of you as to be an entrepreneur. It takes real grit and determination. And so I think that there's maybe two things I would say there. One is, and those who know me will perhaps laugh at my kind of my cliche phrase, which is that there's always a price for everything, and that's not meant to be kind of negative or pessimism. It's just about kind of, I think a lot of people go into things, or they approach things, or they walk away from things without having considered that question. Sort of what am I willing to do for this, and what am I expecting to get out of this, and am I happy? Do I feel that what I'm about to pay price-wise, and whether that could be time, it could be money, or job opportunities, or personal life, kind of opportunities. And what am I going to gain? And am I happy that those things are aligned? And potentially to keep revisiting that question, because your answers to that are likely to shift over time. So I find myself surprised by the number of budding entrepreneurs that are really excited about what they think they're going to get out of it, but haven't really considered at what price. That's, as I said, that's not actually to scare people away from it. It's actually to increase your likelihood of success. Because you don't, you're prepared for some of the challenges that may come, perhaps with a different lens, or you view those setbacks with a different lens. I think the other kind of tip I would say would be, wherever you can, try not to do things completely alone here. There are kind of incubators out there. There are, kind of, mentors, mentorship programs like the one at, kind of at Antler, sort of an incubator, as well as a kind of a startup advisory kind of business there. So likely you may know somebody in your network that knows someone in your network, in their network that can maybe be of use. So, I think people have done, trodden your path before in some way, shape, or form. So, kind of approaching those people and kind of get insight, or, when I set up, when we set up Alchemy, that we were 4 co-founders, and a lot of people at the time used to kind of say, how do you make it work as 4 co-founders? Aren't you going to be constantly at odds with each other? And sure, there are, I would say, healthy tensions at times, but I think at the flip side is we were 4 very, very different individuals, and so we complemented each other. And it's very seldom that one approach is going to be the best and the right one for every situation every time. And it's kind of recognizing that you don't necessarily have all the right answers all the time. That's okay. Nobody really does. And so, however, whether that's other co-founders, whether that's mentors, but yeah, sort of trying not to do too much of this alone, and looking for some support. It can be exhausting to do it entirely on your own. That would be my other tip.
I think they're amazing bits of advice. I could definitely, I run my own business for 12 years. I could definitely agree and empathise with both of those. The opportunity of the cost of what you're willing to give is definitely a major one. I definitely agree with thinking back to when I set the business up and reflecting on what I want for 2021 in terms of having a place that my fundamental reason for setting my own business was I wanted a place that I'd be happy working, and that's always been a key sort of drive for myself. And actually, this year's definitely not been a happy year. So one of the key goals for me is definitely to make sure that I enjoy being involved day to day in the business, and whatever role that is in terms of it, finding something like that. So no, I would fundamentally agree with both of your points. So that's been great. No, Rob, I think it's a pretty great time to wrap up, and thank you very much for getting involved in the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
A lot longer with lots of the points you raised, but I think there's been some great advice and some great takeaways. So no, thank you very much for your involvement, and I look forward to working with you and speaking to you in the future.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. All the best.